Hello everybody. Concepts and approaches in agroecology for sustainable food systems will be the topic of this short lecture. I am Alexander Wezel. I am from ISARA Lyon in France. ISARA is an engineer school for agriculture, food science and environment. So, the intended learning outcomes of this lecture is to learn more about the different interpretations of agroecology, to distinguish between the different scale approaches in scientific agroecology, and to get insight into the main topics of the food systems approach in agroecology, and finally, to know the different levels of transforming the global food systems. So let's start with the main three interpretations of agroecology, which are, on the one side, it's a scientific discipline, it's a movement, but it's also, at the same time, a practice. But let's focus on the scientific discipline approach. So there we have also three approaches within the scientific approach. The blood scale approach, where we look at plant production and animal production in a certain agroecosystem, and sometimes we look at the environment. Then the agroecosystem scale approach, where we look at these plant and animal productions within a certain agroecosystems and its natural resources and the impact from and to the environment. And finally, the food systems approach, which integrates not only the questions of the environment and the plant production, animal production within an agroecosystem, but also questions related to society, impacts and from and to politics, as well as questions related to economy. So if we look at, again, at these main interpretations of agroecology with the three main interpretations as I mentioned before, so the scientific discipline, the movement and the practice, we can go into detail a little bit more as we did for the scientific discipline, so the blood field scale approach, the agroecosystems ecology and the ecology of the food systems. But also for the movements we have the environmentalism and the rural development, and we also have social and political movements for sustainable agriculture and even some policies. For example, France is the only country in the world so far which has a specific policy for agroecology. And finally, we have the practice with different techniques which are used, and also landscape management practices if we go to the agroecosystem scale. Now, just quickly coming to two most recent definitions of agroecology. So there's the one of Francis et al. From 2003, where agroecology is the integrative study of the ecology of the entire food systems in taking into account ecological, economic and social dimensions. And then there is the one from Kliesmann of 2007, that agroecology is the science of applying ecological concepts and principles to the design and the management of sustainable food systems. But there are also movements with their own agroecology definitions. So these movements include movements of peasants, indigenous people, agricultural workers, with demand for food sovereignty and autonomy for local populations. And also agroecology as a practice, as an alternative to high input chemical intensive agriculture is often also mentioned. Now we change to the main research topics of the food systems approach in agroecology. So if we just look at the topics which are mainly related only to the food systems level, we have questions about food quality, food labels and geographical indications. Then our other category of topics is the organization of food supply chain, employment, distribution of economic benefits. Then local and rural development and governance, and finally, stakeholder networks and social relations. If we look at topics which apply at all three scales, we have topics such as innovation, transition and changing practices, knowledge production and exchange, then learning processes and extension and participation. But now, again, going a little bit more into detail about these food systems topics, we have to distinguish between natural and social science approaches. Let's start first with the natural science food systems approach, where we often have what we could call a bottom-up approach. So we have the field and pastures where we have different practice and techniques which are analyzed, and at the farm or the agroecosystem scale, we look at farm organization, farming systems, agricultural land use, and at the landscape scale. And then the food system, at the food system scale, commodity chain and production networks are of interest for research. If we now look at the social science food systems approach, this is often quite differently done in coming from more global levels to local levels. At the global level, long supply chains, agricultural policy, markets and consumer behavior is very important as topics. At the local level, short supply chains, collective organization of farmers, stakeholders, consumer relationships and rural development are important topics. And finally, we have the farmer and farm approach level, where we look at farm organization, economic performance, farmer social representation and knowledge. Now, coming to another part of the lecture is agroecology and the transformation of the food systems. And we have to distinguish here 5 different levels. Level 1 is the increase of input use efficiency, while in reducing the use of costly, scarce or environmentally damaging inputs. For example, reducing chemical fertilizer use because we have a problem with water quality. Level 2 is substitute conventional inputs and practices with alternatives. An example here is that we replace pesticide use with biological control approaches. Level 3 then is the redesign of the agroecosystem, so that it's function on the basis of a new set of ecological processes that provide systems resistance. And this redesign is often quite complicated for farmers because, for example, if they integrate new reduced tillage or no tillage in the system, they sometimes have to redesign it completely. Level 4 is then reconnect again the 2 most important parts of the food system. So we, the consumers, and producers, the farmers, through the development of alternative food networks. Well-known examples are the CSA systems, or the community-supported agriculture systems, food box schemes, and other alternative networks. And finally, we come to level 5, build a new global food system, which is not easy, of course, which is then based on participation, localness, fairness and justice. That is not only sustainable, but also helps to restore and protect Earth's life support system. So maybe that's a dream or a paradise, what we think here about the level 5, but this should be the final goal if we really want to establish sustainable food systems. So what should you take home with you as the key messages? The first one is agroecology is at the same time a movement, a science and a practice. Don't forget this if you discuss with people. Then the food systems approach in agroecology gained really large importance in the last years and now also linking clearly science and movements. The food systems approach deals with a broad variety of topics, as you have seen, connecting agricultural production, food and food systems. And finally, we also have the food system. We need to integrate different scale approaches, so plot scale, agroecosystem, food systems approach, and also integrate natural and social science to analyze completely and with a holistic approach the food systems. And with this, I thank you for your attention